I think this would be helpful to all Christians, even the ones that are wrong that don't agree with me. But seriously, not that that wasn't serious. Uh, in the literature, there's a thing called slogans. And it seems to me, I can't explain this much better than this, where I'm at right now, but I think you have to understand Paul as speaking in slogans somewhere in his writings of all the epistles. Otherwise, he will be contradicting himself if you don't accept some of the things he says as slogans. Because if it's not a slogan, he's contradicting himself. What do I mean? I mean, what some people will read as not a slogan, someone else has to read as a slogan. Meaning, Paul is repeating something people are saying and then refuting it. Okay? Like, some people would say, I suffer not a woman to speak in church or whatever, right? Is that a slogan? Is he, I'm going to say what people are saying and then show why it's wrong. And you can deduce this by the context perhaps, or, carefully work it out. I'm not going to tell you if that's a slogan or not. I'm just saying some people have offered the idea that that's a slogan. Maybe they're liberals. Maybe they're right. It's not the point. I'm just trying to talk, what is a slogan? I think a slogan is clearly a slogan, obviously a slogan, and I can explain why, but when Paul says all things are lawful, and then he goes on, and it sure sounds like the next part's for sure a slogan, but many people don't think when he says all things are lawful, he's talking about a slogan. He says we're not under the law, we're under grace. Are we under a law? Any law? He goes on to condemn sexual immorality in the church strongly. So I think that's a slogan. He's not saying all things are lawful. He also teaches the law never saved people before. Why would you do away with God's law unless it used to save you, but now Jesus saves you? So we do you know what's true about that? Is you receive the blessings of God by faith in the Old Testament through that covenant. So are you saved by the law? Well, yeah, you're saved by God by being connected to him through the covenant. We're not under that covenant anymore. We're under Messiah. But Messiah was magnify the law. Not magnify the exact same covenant. He promised a new covenant. Not like the one I made with them when I took them by the hand of the land of Egypt. He fulfills the Passover by becoming the Passover lamb and the one sacrificed for all. So here's another example of how slogans can cause miscommunication between Christians on social media. You can see on the screen, let me see, hopefully, like right here. Notice it's Dr. Brown doing his famous and brilliant objections by Jews of Jesus being the Messiah. Notice what it's called. The servant in Isaiah 53 can't be Jesus because he's referred to in this plural. The pronouns in Isaiah 53 must be talking about Israel, right? That's what people say. Look, notice, we all know Dr. Brown's position so well. It doesn't strike us as being... we kind of intuitively know this is like a slogan thing, right? Dr. Brown isn't saying this is true, the title of the video. That's the objection he's answering. And we don't even stop and think about it. But let's say this is someone who you don't like. Say it's a Seventh-day Adventist who teaches you have to keep the Sabbath, and you don't keep the Sabbath. And then a Seventh-day Adventist had a video called this. And there was a video saying, you're supposed to keep the Sabbath. SDAs are right. And then you read that title. Well, anybody who knows SDA would know that they totally agree with Dr. Brown, that Jesus is the Messiah. And of course, Isaiah 53 is talking about Jesus. But if you don't like Adventists, and that was who made this video, it wouldn't be so obvious that that was a quote-unquote slogan. That is an objection that's being answered. The same thing happens with And then, of course, you would be wrong if that were the case, right? Because, of course, Adventists would wholeheartedly stand behind Dr. Brown and his ministry regarding that issue. But this thing happened, a really good example of people being uncharitable, making assumptions, jumping to conspiratorial thinking would be, and it's embarrassing, if you're a good person, in my opinion, and you make this sort of mistake, you should be embarrassed if you've misrepresented somebody and made false witness because of your, uncharitableness or hatefulness or dishonesty, wanting to put someone down and be willing to do it dishonestly and jump to conclusions that aren't appropriate. That should be embarrassing to a Christian when that happens. And then they should learn from that mistake and not make it again. I've made that mistake. And I want to encourage Christians not to make that mistake and to always be like Christ would be. He doesn't dunk on people because he knows they're heretics. You don't get to be like Jesus and whip the money changers and then turn around and say, I can't be like Jesus. Only a works-based heretic would suggest that we could be like Jesus. And then you turn around and say, justify your behavior because Jesus whipped the money changers. Well, guess what? You're not like Jesus. If you're not being transformed to the image of the Son, and the only time you want to be like Jesus is when you're being a jerk. You're a hypocrite. You're the Pharisee. So this happened to, idol killer, the open heretic, the open theist heretic, quote unquote, according to a lot of people. By the way, Warren McGrew is probably one of the best examples of what it looks like to be a Christian in my experience, with the way he treats people fairly, is charitable most of the time, and an all-around reflection of honest character like Christ. I see Christ in that, so that happens every now and again with people from all sorts of different positions. So when Warren McGrew made videos about James White, and the title was the things James White was accusing him of. That is Warren. Like, I don't even remember them, but Calvinists saw those videos, didn't watch them, and because of their dislike of Warren McGrew or their fanboyness for Dr. White, they assumed Warren was saying that about Dr. White. It's like this. It's like there's slogans. It's not necessarily the source of the video that's saying the thing on the thumbnail. It may be the thing people are saying that this video is answering from this source. And it's easy to miss that. When Warren McGrew puts James White on his thumbnail and it says theological buffoon, if you like James White, you get mad and righteous indignation because you think, oh, look, he's labeled Dr. White a theological buffoon. And this is Warren McGrew's video. But in reality, that's the phrase Dr. White said about Warren, and he's answering Dr. White, quoting Dr. White with a picture of Dr. White. And so the reason you hated Warren McGrew is the reason why you should be distasteful towards James White, who said that about Warren McGrew. But you don't really care about that, do you? Because you're not honest, charitable, and even-tempered. You're a hypocrite if you don't learn from that mistake. Oh, wow. I was all offended that he was calling James White this bad name, and so I'm mad and I think he's a bad person to platform. Come to find out, that's actually a quote of James White about Warren McGrew, and Warren McGrew honestly answering and explaining it and totally blowing James White out of the water for his claims. So the reason you hated Warren McGrew is the reason you should if that hate is justified for such representation, you should now not like James White. But that didn't happen, did it? You continue to feel the same way, and you're glad James White said that because he's a heretic, right? Wrong. Maybe you're the heretic.